of the mortgage banking industry. Dave, I know that's a long resume, and I didn't cover half of it, by the way, but I want to thank you for joining us. I really appreciate your insights on the market. Thanks for making time for us.
Good to be with you, Brian, as always.
Well, I think we want to cut through some clutter. You do a great job of giving perspective to people, and also letting people know, hey, we got some good opportunities in front of us. So let's kind of start with the big picture of what you're seeing with mortgage rates. You have a great understanding, your fingers on the pulse. What are you seeing with mortgage rates? That's the big question everybody wants to know.
Yeah, I think that for everybody, as they look at interest rates, it's really easy to become dismayed. In fact, I love your intro because you can get really confused by bad information. The Federal Reserve's done one of the most dramatic increase in interest rates that we've seen in our lifetimes. What you're looking at here is the history of the federal funds rate. That's the rate that Chairman Powell's been moving most recently, going back to 1955. So we have decades of history. And the only thing that I want everybody to look at this slide and realize is that every time the Fed starts raising rates, they always overshoot. They always result in create a recession, small or large, and then they drop rates shortly thereafter. The gray vertical lines in this chart are recessions since 1955. This is from the Federal Reserve of St. Louis. And as you can see, the Fed, in response to trying to slow inflation of one kind or another over the decades, has started raising rates, but they always go too far, just as Powell has done this time. And so while the Fed chairman paused, as you pointed out with inflation, it is dropping. And we think inflation is dropping faster than maybe Chairman Powell thinks.
Right.
But we will realize that when he does by stopping the increases. But all that leads you, along with a lot of other indicators, is to realize one core reality. Rates are coming down, gang. Yeah. They aren't going to be up at this level much longer. We expect by the end of the year, 30-year fixed-rate loans will have already begun to drop, and they will drop even further next year. What you have here is a copy of an article from Forbes, which just highlights a lot of different economists' views. Heading off at the very top, be prepared to jump on in a dip in rates. Robert Frick from Navy Federal Credit Union. Freddie Mac's economist, Sam Cater, rates should gently decline over the course of 2023. NAR's chief economist, mortgage rates will drop with 30-year mortgages falling progressively to 6% this year and into the mid 5% range next year. I think it's going to go lower than that, but that's fine. That's Lawrence Young. Yeah. First American, Bank of America, the Mortgage Bankers Association, mortgage bankers chief economist Mike Fratantoni, one of the smartest economists in America, in my view.
Right.
Our forecast is for 30-year mortgages to be closer to 5.5 by year end, and he predicts dropping into the mid 4s next year. People don't guess this; they're not making it up. They look at things like spreads between the 2-year and the 10-year Treasury, which is inverted, and the 10-year and the 30-year, and things that I'm not going to bore you with. But all the economic indicators basically are screaming at market makers and Wall Street and saying, gang, rates are coming down. That doesn't mean, as you would say, Brian, you don't wait for that rate.
Right.
You buy the home of your dreams when you can buy the home of your dreams. You rent the rate, and then you refinance it when it comes down further. Right. But I do think that those lower rates are going to bring in an incredible wave of home buying demand as we go forward, and I'll show you in just a moment.
You bet. Well, no doubt. And also, for us, one of the big issues that people have is there's no inventory. And one of the things I'm going to talk about today is people, for the first time, I'm 37 years in real estate. I've never had a situation where homeowners were staying in their house because of the rate and not the house. And they've put off a move. They've wanted to move. They wanted to downsize or upgrade or whatever, but they're sitting on a rate in the mid 2s or the low 3s, and they don't want to trade it for 6. So they're going, I'm just going to stick around. So it's exasperated the inventory issues even more. And so what's going to take place, and the Fed was slow to raise rates in the beginning, and they will be too long in reducing them. And that's just their history, and you show that since 1955. That's what they do. But we have to be prepared because we have to do the groundwork to get people and to get leads and to get buyers in the right frame of mind and the sellers. And like I said, you pointed out all these great people today that have the same opinion with tremendous research. It's just not highly publicized. I'm right in lockstep with you. I do think, someone says all the time that, inflation coming down is like a slinky coming down the stairs. And, it's gone from 8 to 5. I believe the real inflation rate right now is somewhere in the mid 3s, but they're not going to show that for a bit. And so they'll be a little bit behind. We know when they get to 2, the rates will be 4 and everybody's happy. But here we go. I would love from your perspective, because you've been on not heavy on the mortgage side, but also, you ran one of the biggest real estate companies in the country. What advice do you have for real estate agents, for them and for their clients right now, people who are listening to this, based on your information?
Well, there's a great slide that I've got that shows the history of median home prices in this country. Mm-hmm. That's also from the Federal Reserve. Home prices only go up. Yes, we have short-term corrections, but frankly, that's when you should buy. I mean, if you can buy during the correction, that's your greatest opportunity. And right. Frankly, and unfortunately, as this slide shows, whatever slowdown we may be seeing in some pockets of the country, and it's not everywhere, as you all know, in many markets, you're still standing in line and having to put in multiple offers, and mm-hmm. cash buyers are beating you to the punch. But real estate is all about supply and demand. And when you look at supply right now, we have one of the lowest inventories of resale homes on the market going back decades. This slide is going back to 1999 from the National Association of Realtors, showing about 3 months supply on the market. The good news, inventory will slowly start rising. The National Association of Home Builders just recently announced that new housing starts hit a record high. It was a massive increase that just was recently announced. That's going to help bring new inventory to market. But Brian, pent-up demand is also one of these things that's an interesting thing to look at. And there's pent-up demand with buyers, and this slide's really important as we talk to that. But sellers are also holding back, as you pointed out, because they have a 2% rate. But at the end of the day, if you're a growing family and you've had another child recently and you don't have a room for that child, you're going to have to go buy a house.
Yep.
And if you're retired and you don't want that big house anymore, you may hold on for a while thinking, God, that 2% rate is so good. Maybe selling it into a 6% or 7% rate isn't doable. But when rates get into the 5s or 4s, people are going to look at that difference and go, it's time, it's worth it. I'm going to make that move, and we'll see resale inventory rising.
Yeah.
But for all of you out there who may be working with potential clients who are sitting on the sidelines waiting for some miracles for home prices to drop even more, or for the situation to get better for home buyers, you better give that up. This is the distribution of everybody in the United States of America by age. It's a population distribution from 0 to 100 plus. And what everybody, I think, in real estate knows is the median age for first-time home buyers is somewhere between age 34 and 35. I underline 35 on this chart. If you draw your lines up to the black line above and go to the left of age 35, meaning 34-year-olds, 33-year-olds, 32-year-olds, those spikes represent the biggest wave of population ever in the history of this country to be rolling into the median age for first-time home ownership that we have ever seen in the history of America. Bigger than the baby boom generation when they started buying in the early 1980s. The millennials, which we've been talking about for a long time, are here now. And the nation is literally standing. All of you are literally standing on the front doorstep of the largest wave of home buying demand in U.S. history. And that's not guesswork, it's fact. I just showed you the data, and there are multiple slides that talk about that.
Well, and we know this, there's tremendous amount of surveys have been done to say what's the number one goal, economic goal, investment goal of millennials, and it always comes back, own a home. I want to own a home. I want to own my own home. And COVID actually accelerated that even further because home became such a critical thing. So the truth of the matter is we've had this, very long run up, and then we ran into COVID. And I used to say, when we had the toilet paper shortages during COVID, that real estate was the next toilet paper. And that sure enough happened. And it was exhausting for agents and exhausting for the market, and 27 multiple offers. And we've had this little cooling period. We've gone down probably, 1 million transactions. I believe I think the trough was a couple of months ago, the very bottom of the volume of transactions. And now what's happening is inflation has cooled. We had these such accelerated rates by the Fed. I mean, they almost like in an airplane tried to stall the plane. And the demand is so strong, they still couldn't do it. They couldn't do it, with rentals even. So I do believe we're on the doorstep. There's people coming. It is supply and demand. Their number one goal is to own homes. And like you say, there's pent-up demand for sellers to move, right, downsize, upgrade, whatever it is, move out of state. And now they're like, once that delta gets to an acceptable number, it's going to hit us pretty quick. And so what I want to do, and what we'll be talking about at the end of this show today, is how to prepare in the third and fourth quarters, and then ultimately what's coming in 2024. And we're going to get into that here in a minute with your projections. But before we get into that, one of the questions, Dave, that I'm just getting peppered with a lot, and I just think your unique perspective would be great for people to hear. Obviously, we had some banks go down. We've heard it's the run on the banks. It's here comes It's a Wonderful Life, and so a lot of people are concerned about the health and well-being of our banks. What's your insight on that?
Well, look, we're not out of the woods with the banking system. Mm-hmm. Signature Bank and Silicon Valley Bank were unique. They had long investments in 30-year mortgages and other long treasuries that they thought were going to bring them a good return. What they didn't realize is as the Fed raised rates, short-term rates, their depositors, who were big dollar depositors, demanded higher rates to be paid on their deposits.
Yep.
And so they ended up becoming underwater. They were earning less than they were actually paying depositors. Mm-hmm. It was a very unique scenario for Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank because they had a high concentration of large net worth depositors who demanded higher rates. But it is a problem. And what the other shoe to drop, so to speak, is commercial real estate. And there's a concern about what's going to happen as all this commercial real estate has to refinance into pretty significantly higher rates, and what that'll mean to their cash flow and what we call cap rates and things of this sort. Mm-hmm. But the big banks are safe. The banks are FDIC insured. And really, in the end of the day, consumers should not worry as long as they're keeping their balances below the limits. And while there may be some fluctuations and perhaps a few more bank failures, not a lot, but a few more of other banks that had similar portfolios like Signature and Silicon Valley, we'll deal with that as we go forward. But I really think as it relates to all of us in looking at real estate and looking at housing demand, it really has no relationship. If anything, the banking securities are keeping the Fed on edge, and it's one of the reasons why they paused this last time.
Right.
And it's one of the reasons I believe personally they're not going to do more increases, but that's yet to be said.
At the end of the day, even if they do a small one, it's going to be short term, and they're going to see it very quickly. I have 4 buildings in our campus here, hundreds of thousands of square feet. Here's the bottom line. I have 78 employees that now live out of state. We have people come into the office 3 days a week. We don't need all the square footage we used to need. And that's just a matter of life. And it's COVID kind of accelerated it and moved it down the path. But I think, there is definitely some issues coming with commercial real estate. Other than the banking structure and asset, I don't think it really affects, it won't affect the ordinary everyday agent, and it won't affect 95% of their customers.
Yeah.
So I think you're bang on there. Okay, here's the sexy part, Dave. We call this the bold predictions. You've already alluded to it. I just think you got a great handle on this. I think it's going to be very encouraging for people to hear this. I really don't think they're hearing this anywhere else. Give us your projections for the rest of this year and into 2024. Interest rates, transactions. What do you see happening?
Yeah, so I'm going to share with you some data. This is a forecast looking forward on a variety of things. I highlighted existing home sales and new home sales, as well as interest rates. Mm-hmm. This year is going to be a tough year. 2023, if you look at existing home sales, it's going to be about 4.2 million home sales, down from the 5 million that happened last year. And 2021 and 2020 were great years too. But if you notice in the forecast, the expectation is for ever increasing home sales. In fact, going out 2 years from now to 2025, it'll be a year bigger than last year. It'll line up to be the second or third biggest home sales year in American history. And it's going to be fed by those demographics that I showed you. And the low supply, which will improve enough to meet this demand, but still won't be enough. It will ensure steady home price appreciation, low single digits as we look in the outer years. People need to not focus on the here and now, because the here and now is an awkward technical environment brought on by the Federal Reserve, trying to control an overheated economy, which, as you said, is going to turn into a slinky as it heads downstairs in just a short bit here.
Right.
And that's why it also leads into our interest rate forecast, which is ending the year at sub 6% and literally going down into the mid 4s next year. And by the way, that will be complemented with a couple of Fed rate reductions in 2024, which they will have to do because they will have pushed us into a mild recession, and they will be reversing course, not as dramatically as they increased rates, but they will reverse course slightly as we look into the next year.
You bet.
All of this is bullish, in my view.
Yeah. Well, it's fantastic. I mean, look, if I'm sitting here today and I'm an agent and I go, okay, our 30-year rate in 2022 was 6.6, and by the end of 23 it's 5.6, and by 24 it's 4.8, and by 25 it's 4.5. I mean, those are magic numbers. And Powell has been, if nothing, he's been consistent about this. He wants to get to 2% inflation. He wants to get the rates into 4% territory. And like I say, you've got the supply and demand. We got that giant number of millennials, which is the core. You have employment, you have population, you have demand. And real estate has continued to become, you know, I got a son who's just gotten engaged, and he and his fiance are looking for a house, right? So it's where it's at. It's always where it's been. I'm decades at it, you're decades at it. We have a lot of the reporters today, and I don't mean this in a disrespectful way, we have a lot of people who do the reporting today. It's done in a technical fashion. Many of them are in their early 20s, and they've never seen any other cycles. They've never known anything other than the last 11 years where the prices just went up. And so I truly believe this is great information. It is a hopeful picture. I think we've passed the bottom. We've gone from 5.1 million transactions. We're going to finish at 4.2.5. That's a big drop. I mean, it's almost 20%. That's a big drop off. That's very significant. People are feeling that. But now you can start to build them up. And it's like, buy the dream home. You're renting the rate, as you say, and then refi. You might have a year to wait. You might have 2 years to wait. But you're in the ballpark. Transactions are going to go back up. And then people who put off selling are going to absolutely be back in the game, wanting to put their house on the market.
Absolutely.
Well, Dave, it's brilliant stuff. He's Dave Stevens, and he's the CEO of Mountain Lake Consulting. And you can reach out to us if you're looking for a little bit of help from Mountain Lake with your organization. These guys are fantastic. Dave, your insight is always fabulous. And we appreciate you making time for us today and our audience. You know, it's just marvelous that we're able to bring this information to people. And for a lot of agents, I know they're going to feel hopeful. I mean, again, I already was doing this research. I had my sources. And when I saw your stuff, I went, it just gave me a great night's sleep to know, okay, this is where we're headed. It all makes sense to me. And, you know, the future's looking bright, and we can do well if we're a pro and approach it in the right way.
Absolutely. Thanks, Brian. Good to be with you.
Dave, thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate you. Best of luck. God bless. Good health. And we'll see you real soon.
Sounds great.